But now I'm going to show you some of this science very briefly. So let's go back to another presentation. Oh, yeah, not this one. I'm going to waste mine. Sorry for that. All right. Okay. So here are the places where the meditators come from. Nice, quiet places. You know, if you are to go for $20,000 of meditation, you better find a quiet place. And then you can try in traffic jams. So those are various places I was lucky to be and photograph in the Himalayas over 40 years. This is a really good place for meditation. There's nothing else you can do. No supermarkets, no movie halls. And then, so just another of those places. Then the great teachers, those who taught us spiritual practice, meditation. Here, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, some of you might have heard. He was one of the Dalai Lama's teachers. He was a great master of the 20th century. And he spent 30 years in meditation himself, solitary retreats. He was a great scholar, a great poet. He was an extraordinary human being above all. And so myself and even some friends here were lucky to spend some years near him and benefit from his teachings. And many of the disciples who went to the lab, the first batch, were some of his students. Kangyo Rinpoche, my first teacher, whom I met in 1967, and then I was going back and forth from Pasteur Institute, studying with him, and then I finally decided to stay near him until he passed away. So now, here, at quite a different scene, 10,000 kilometers away, in Madison, Wisconsin, with 126 or so electrodes. And electroencephalogram is not terribly precise to see the deep structures in the brain, but it's very, very sharp and fast to detect very fast changes, about millisecond change you can detect. And depending where the activation change, you can roughly know if it's, say, in the prefrontal cortex or in the back of the brain and so forth. So it gives you some kind of idea. For some studies, it's very good. And again, you hear sometime in the newspaper, just the same way that they speak of the happiest person in the world, all these cliches, that this monk studies, Tibetan monks, but that's not the case at all. What was studied were long-term practitioners. They are lay people, they are men, they are women, equal number, in fact, and from the East and from the West. This is a British doctor. So, you see, he did 9 years of retreat, and with Antoine Lutz putting the cap on him. And then he has a great teacher, Matthieu Ricard, who wrote The Joy of Living and other books, who is a wonderful, he did many years of retreat. He started when he was 13 years old to do 2 consecutive 3 years meditative retreats. So, as he says, unfortunately, that's not the way you meditate in MRI machine. It has set 4 characteristics. It is cold, it is narrow, it is dark, and it is noisy. So that's not the best place to meditate, but still you can make something out of it. So here, the first time I ever went in Madison with Richard Davidson, a leading scientist on emotion. And so we spent sometime up to 2.5 hours. So that was at the end of 2.5 hours, so a great relief from everyone. And so this is just to give you a quick idea with the electroencephalogram meditating on compassion, or loving kindness, which is sort of, well, in Buddhist terms, loving kindness is the wish that may all sentient beings be happy and find the cause of happiness. So when that unconditional love, in a way, encounters suffering, it's become what we call compassion, which is the wish made of being free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So basically it's the same thing, the same benevolence, whether it meets in general with all sentient beings or it encounters suffering. So here, the point is you need to compare with something and with someone. So naive subjects, what they are. People that we explained them the principles of compassion meditation, and they did it for a week, sincerely, the best they could. Came back to the lab. And even for those subjects, we asked them two states. A resting state where you do nothing, and a state where you try the best you can to bring this unconditional love and compassion within your mind, either thinking of a person or just like as a kind of experience. So, and then you do that the same with meditators. So what you see here, the down curve is the novice subjects. The violet line is when they rest. Nothing happens. And then the blue line is when they engage in compassion meditation. Nothing happens either. Well, it's not that they don't feel something, but that something is not strong enough to make a threshold. No, but when you now do with meditators, and that study was done with 15 of them, and that's some kind of average. At the rest time, they also rest. They don't do anything special. But when they engage in the compassion meditation, there's this incredibly intense activation. And this is about the frequency. So that's in the gamma range of the brain frequencies. The gamma range which has to do with synchrony in different areas of the brain and so forth. But it also occurs in areas of the brain connected with positive affect. Prefrontal cortex, the insula that has to do with empathy, with loving kindness, with perceiving also emotions in your own body, and so forth. So there is a huge difference. So big, in fact, that they had to call all the experts. Is something wrong with that? It's the way we do things, the way we measure it. Maybe meditators are doing something strange. They are clenching their teeth or something, because it creates some kind of gamma activation with a strong muscle activation, whatever. But then it was done with many meditators, checked with many other conditions, and it turns this always comes like that. So it seems to be specific to the result of training. And then to eliminate, then if you compare with what you get when you do MRI studies, which is a quite different method and which is very, very precise in terms of going deep in the brain into small locations. So here you can again, for this loving kindness meditation, the meditators resting, and then those are the areas that are activated. The more sort of yellow they are, it indicates a stronger activation. So those are different areas that you see activated in the meditators, and it's very fast. 30 seconds of rest, and then 2 or 3 minutes of engaging in the meditation. And within 15 seconds, they come almost at the optimal. So there's something that they can immediately engage in at almost the maximum level. Now you do the same thing with novice. Then there's the resting state, there's the meditation state. As you can see, not much happening. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just simply show that you have not been trained. It's kind of true for everything. Doing mathematical equations or playing piano or something, when we don't have developed the skill, then we don't do it well. So now, after that, say, okay, what happens if you do it for a much shorter period? So there was 3-month studies that showed after 3 months, as I will show you also, anxiety goes down, the immune system is boosted, and then we start going, not when I say we, it's my scientist friend, sometimes I go there and discuss with them. But so what happens 8 weeks, 4 weeks, and then even down to 2 weeks make a difference. So what we're doing here is doing metta, which is loving kindness meditation. And then to compare with something that is quite efficient. It's cognitive reappraisal. It's a good psychological method to consider a situation in a different light, from different perspective, and usually it is in itself quite good for pro-social behavior. But if you measure prosocial behavior with some kind of games, economic games and so forth, you see a significant increase, much more prosocial tendencies and behavior in those who did 2 weeks of loving-kindness meditation compared to the control group. And that's not just behavior in economic games. If you look at the brain, within 2 weeks, you have a deactivation in those people of the lesser activation of the amygdala that has to do with aggressivity, with anger, with fear, and there was more control from the higher cognitive aspect of the brain. Just 2 weeks. So that's quite remarkable. But then also, the idea was how flexible those states are. Enter, in and out. Can you modulate the intensity? So here with experienced meditator, that was Tanya Singer, asked, could you by chance, do for me like 30% of compassion? Or 60%, and then 90%, and could you jump from one to the other, go from 90 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 0, back straight to 90? Well, I said, let's try. So that experiment, we spent 22 hours in MRI in 3 days. That was the kind of marathon MRI. And then average everything. And then you can see here whether we do it with unconditional compassion, with loving kindness, with compassion for someone in pain. No matter any of those states, there were, when they measured the activation of the related areas, like especially the insula that has to do with empathy, clearly you can see that kind of progression between 30, 60, and 90. So it was quite interesting. And then we said, when you do a particular training, does it also spill over as a skill for something that you have not trained for? You become good at something, but that makes you automatically good at something that you didn't necessarily train for. For instance, imagining pain, physical pain. We don't meditate just thinking, I'm going to meditate for 3 hours. How can I suffer a lot? Or feel it, a strong toothache. So that's we don't train for sure. But will the training on attention and compassion give you a skill that any mental state actually you could generate? So it was tried. First, there's a whole bunch of study on real pain and how you can modulate. I don't think I will have time to go into that, but it really works. I can decrease up to 30% the subjective pain by different types of meditation, including compassion. But here you could just imagine a burning sensation, like someone putting an iron on your forearm. And what would that do if you imagine that a little bit, a bit stronger, and very strong, very hot? So that 30%, 60%, 90%. And then the meditators, they just did it. When you measure the brain, the various networks involved with pain, and then they found this same gradation. So it shows that the mind has become flexible. The mind can be used, can be trained to whatever task you put it on. So that requires an increased quality of vigilance, of attention, of mindfulness. So there's also plenty of tests that measure people's quality of attention. It's called the continuous, what is it called, CPT, continuous performance task. That means you have a small number, very small, like size 12 on the middle of the screen, numbers flashing, and it's very fast, several per second. Each time there's a 0, you push a button. If it's not a 0, don't push the button. It seems quite stupid, but after 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, the tendency is to make so many mistakes. You push when it's a 8, you don't push when it's a 0. So what happens typically is your sort of performance goes down and down and down. You get tired. Now, here with the experienced meditators, there was some of them that just came out of 3 years of retreat. Basically, many of them had a completely flat curve, flat line. That means 45 minutes means 1,000 times pushing that thing on this very fast. 0 mistake. 0. 3 subjects achieved that. And the other ones were 98.5, 98.8, all this kind of looks flat. And what was very revealing is one of them, which is one of those who did the 3 years retreat. He was just sitting like that, and he said, "Oh, that's finished? Well, I can continue if you want. What's the problem?" So he didn't feel tired. It was quite funny, quite enjoyable. So what does that say when you hear someone saying that? When we begin to learn something, we don't do it well, and we are very nervous, and it's tiring, and quickly we have to stop and rest, and so that we have no ease, we have tension, nervosity, riding a bicycle for the first time. Then, as you go, you do it well and with ease. You don't get tired so easily. You can ride a bicycle for a long time, you can lift your hands and look in the sky and whistle, and still you don't fall. So that's a skill, doing something well and with ease. So that applies to attention. So attention is crucial, because if you want to cultivate anything else, compassion, loving kindness, if your mind is wandering all over the place, it's not going to work. So to come back to the short term, one of the first studies was done with 3 months people. There's just 60 people randomly assigned from a biotech company. 30 meditate 20 minutes a day for 3 months, 20 don't, and they say, if you want, after the training, after the 3 months, we'll give you the course if you like. But come to the lab every week, and we measure your parameters. After 3 months, the level of anxiety was significantly smaller in the meditators, not in the other ones. The level of the immune system was much more robust than in the non-meditators. The level of cortisol, that is measure stress, was smaller, much less than in non-meditators, and so forth, and so forth. Big changes. So now, the sort of the aspiration of the Dalai Lama, what can we contribute to society, now comes in the sense of that we can consider that seriously. I remember very well at the beginning of the study, Time magazine made a cover story about those studies, but what they chose as illustration was not that. It was a beautiful blonde, it was a Photoshop something, of course, levitating over a beach. Meditation works. The article was not so bad, but the cover, they could not resist putting that. So now I think it's considered a little bit more seriously, which is good, because now we can, movement for happiness. You can, even in France, you could have secular training to attention, secular training to emotional balance, secular training to various components of well-being, and nobody will jump, saying this is some kind of weird religious sort of cult or something. So, yes, so I will. I mean, there are many other studies. I'm not going to go in details. But so just briefly before ending, we might do a small meditation together if you wish. But before that, just want to again go back to the essentials. Yes, we should improve the living conditions at the workplace, in the society, in the family, provide the conditions for flourishing. I remember very well at the time of Abu Ghraib, when George Bush said there's few bad apples that did what they did terribly wrong in terms of abuse and torture in Iraqi jails. But I remember also Zimbardo, who was one of the psychologists that did the Stanford prison experiment, where he saw that people could go really wrong very fast, even with students. He said it's not the apples that are wrong, it's what you call the barrel or the container that is rotten. So we need to provide a social environment that is conducive to well-being, to have policies that lead to well-being. And as Lord Layard often says, well-being cannot be expected to be just by chance a byproduct of the GDP or something. There are different criteria. They should be taken as goals for what they are, and as primary goals, and not at, hopefully if the economy goes well, we'll all be happy, don't worry about that. Because in many instances in our times, there are byproducts of endless growth that obviously are detrimental to well-being and to the environment. We can see that every day. So those indicators of prosperity in terms of economics, of well-being, of quality of life, of the way we impact positively or negatively the environment, those indexes have to be considered for what they are, because they are different time scale, by the way, short-term, mid-term, longer term. So then to have more consideration for others, genuine altruism is the sort of concept that can help to reconcile those time scales and try to build up a model where we take those indicators in consideration. But just to, before we do a short meditation and take up some questions, because I've lost track of time. Yes, so I thought I will briefly show you that also compassion in action. Richard spoke about what we do in the Himalayas. So we have been doing a number of projects in the health. We treat 100,000 patients a year in our clinics. This is in Nepal, and we have a palliative care units, and we also work with handicapped people. We work in India, in Bihar, in remote villages where we build also a health center, and we work to try to improve the conditions of women, to bring solar electricity, rainwater collection. We build school with a wonderful social entrepreneur that builds school with bamboos, and this is entirely built with bamboos in Nepal for 2,000 kids, 70% girls, for a quite minimum amount of money, and it lasts for quite some time. It's earthquake-proof, ecological, everything. So, and in Tibet, we built 15 different dispensaries and clinics where there was nothing in remote nomadic areas. And we had a program for the health of the mother and the child at time of delivery. Obviously, there's a need for a bridge, isn't it? It's our car. So, again, need for a bridge. So we built 18 bridges, one on the Yangtze River. We take care of the elderly. He's the happiest person in the world for sure. Tibetan doctors is neither a dentist nor ophthalmologist. Elderly people, and the happiest woman in the world now. And you can build a school like that for $25,000, which is pretty a small amount, and so forth and so forth. Here's a school for 800 kids, 26 villages. So go very quickly and briefly, but that's also a way for sure to bring a better well-being in the outer conditions. But that also gets continuously inspired by the inner conditions. So that's way, in a way, if we were to define at least the Buddhist part, maybe I would say, my own little definition will be transform yourself to better serve others. And unless you do that transformation, sometimes you can, try to help others in an unskillful way. Here, helping victims of an earthquake last year in eastern Tibet. Many thousand people died. We're trying to help the victims to go through the winter. We're hoping to build an earthquake-resistant school next year, and so forth. And a few good, nice smiles to end. This guy is about to smile. They don't need, how do you call that? This kind of thing you make to remove wrinkles. So this organization, if you want to have a look. Thank you.